100 games for Kirby Smart. That includes, I don't know how many SEC championship games, 2 SEC championships, 3 national championship games, 2 national championships, domination of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, the Auburn Tigers, the Florida Gators.
A lot of New Year's Six Bowls.
They have won the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Peach Bowl. They have not yet played in the Cotton Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl as a program. This is in 8 years. Mm-hmm. This has been, as I will let you do the Darinoka comment, it's hard to do a lot better than this when you start a career. Kirby Smart has been outstanding at Georgia.
You can't have a better start to your career than Kirby Smart at Georgia. That's what he said. You look at it, the numbers with Nick Saban are almost identical. Kirby, I think, had won more SEC games by 1. Everything they had was like a 1-game difference back and forth. And the only thing that Nick Saban really had better was the 3 national championships in the first 100 games. And Kirby, second and 26 away from that? You know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean. Everybody's going to be cussing you now. But it's, one reason I can think of that Kirby has the extra SEC win was because of COVID. They played 10 games. In Georgia's case, they played 9, so that would be an extra game. They did not play Vanderbilt that year, but he had an extra opportunity to grab a win. So they basically are on the same path. So, Fletcher, Page, and I were at the Gator Bowl in 15, going into the 16th season. And Brian McClendon, who is now the wide receivers coach at Georgia, was the head coach for that game. We were on the field after that game saying, what has to happen for this to work? And it was a revamped offensive and defensive line. That was probably the biggest thing because they had always had skilled players. We're talking about Aaron Murray, Todd Gurley, Malcolm Mitchell, whoever, A.J. Green. But it was the big guys that were kind of the problem at Georgia. They had not had a big man drafted in the first round of the NFL draft since, I think, David Pollock. I could be a little bit wrong about that. That is not okay.
It's the polar opposite now.
Oh, it's totally different.
Complete opposite.
Why does Georgia win?
Well, I mean, there's more than just one reason.
Why do they boil it down to a sentence? Let's be efficient here.
Boil it down to a sentence. That's a tough. Yeah, I don't like you put me on the spot there.
Okay, so what I would say is they win the details. So of everything that goes into the day. Kirby Smart talked at halftime of South Carolina of let's win this moment, but they're ready for the moment. That's the difference, I think, between Georgia right now and LSU or Georgia and Clemson or like these teams who have won national championships recently, and perhaps Georgia and Florida State. Let's just see what happens with Florida State as the season goes on, and Notre Dame and SC. The difference between Georgia and them is they're not rattled by the moment because they're ready for the moment. They're ready for the moment because they're constantly going through the fire at practice. They're being recruited and developed to be elite. All of the catchphrases. Nothing is surprising. The win over Carolina, which has been sort of their toughest deal of late, that was not surprising to me, man, because they have it in their DNA to win. Their default setting is to win. Now, Alabama's used to be that, and we're going to see over this season if that's still the case.
Yeah.
Georgia's default is win. You're going to have to unplug them, throw them in the trash for that to change.
I think if you boil it down to one thing, it's the drive for it. I mean, and that starts with Kirby.
They want to win.
They want it. They just want it more, right? Whatever. SEC means more. At Georgia, they want it more. You can tell. You can tell on the sidelines when you look across at the other sidelines. Those teams just don't want it as much as Georgia.
Well, what does that mean?
That's unfair to say. That's probably not fair
that
for
a
me
little
to
bit better.
They understand how important it is to win. They understand that that's everything, and that they've just dedicated everything to that. Every little detail. That's probably you probably nailed that.
So
the details and the little things. They accomplish all that. We talk about Kirby. His entire day is probably scheduled out to the minute mark. I mean, these guys take it seriously. They take it like it's the only thing that matters. Yeah. It's the only thing that matters is dominating and being elite and being excellent. That's what I'd boil it down to.
So you don't win national championships in January. You win them from January through.
I think you
December.
win it every day.
Right.
I mean,
there's little stuff you have to do every single day in order to win. And when I'm talking about winning the details, that's what I'm talking about. What do we have to do? Like we're at EcoPoly, and I'll plug them in a second. But what we saw with their factory, there's a particular way to do this.
Yeah.
If you do this a particular way, you're going to get a high-quality product. Kirby in 16, okay, listen to everybody, listen to everything. I've got that on pretty good authority, okay? He did it a particular way then. And then he used that year as a learning mechanism to say, how do I want to do this moving forward? Well, it worked pretty well.
You've got to adapt. You've got to adapt, and you've got to change, and they've been able to do that.
One thing, it's just to compare this. I know this is about Kirby again, but I was talking with everybody down here at EcoPoly about how did you get your process down?
Yeah.
And they went through some stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Kirby they lost 5 games in the first season, man.
Yeah. They lost to Vanderbilt and
They lost
Georgia
to
Tech
Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech
in the same year.
on the last play of the game, in both cases, by the way. And there's a way to do certain things. It doesn't mean that that's all that there is to it, but there's a certain way to do stuff. And if you do it the right way and you do it the right way every single time, you stand a pretty good chance of getting the job done. And I think that that's what, Georgia over the last 7 years, has basically been the best product in college football because they've cared the most. These guys here at EcoPoly, okay, in Dodge, in the heart of Georgia, Dodge County, they showed us their process. They're making this stuff from scratch, man.
Yeah.
They get it in. I'm not going to say where they get it in from, right?
Yeah.
They get it in on the rail line. They're building this to specification.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's
two-tone. You can't see this.
It's two-tone. It could be whatever colors you want it to be.
And
there's all sorts of. It's not just these chairs. It's not just tables. They come up with new products all the time.
That's true. We're going to show
It's
those.
an operation. It's the same thing with Georgia.
Yep.
Where 21 was different than 22, and 23 is different than those. And they have the makings of a blueprint to win, but it's different every time. And Kirby knows that. Right? You talk about that halftime speech that SEC Inside showed. In past years, you would maybe see Kirby screaming and hollering. And maybe he knows with this group, maybe he knows in that moment that wasn't the right move. You've got to be able to adapt your process just like EcoPoly has. And as EcoPoly grows, they're going to have to continue to do. That's the same thing with Georgia.
So let me just say this too. All the EcoPoly products, you can get. They're going to have Jenga sets. They're going to have. I've seen right here a swing set, a day bed that swings.
Cornhole. There's all sorts
the
of
cornhole,
stuff,
which
man.
we're going to show soon.
Yeah.
Or maybe you've already seen it. They make everything in house here. The only thing that they don't have are the screws. The only thing that Georgia doesn't do in house or have the players. They got to go get the players. These guys got to go get the screws, and then they develop it. They get it where it's got to go. We talked about this a lot, not that long ago. When did I know Georgia could win the national championship in 01? I told you it was the Vanderbilt game. I just saw the first quarter of the Vandy game was insane. When was it for you? You said Arkansas.
It was first half Arkansas.
Yeah, okay.
I was like, this is a top 10 team coming in there, and they made them look like a cupcake.
Yeah.
And they just
Mauled
swallowed them up.
In 22, for me, it was not the Oregon game, but then the Carolina game was just, this is nuts.
I just saw it that first day, man. I was like, there's no one's going to beat them, man.
Okay.
When you fly down the field like that over and over against,
it was precise,
it was game one.
It wasn't even big plays.
No, it wasn't. It was a bunch of screen passes. It was a bunch of screen passes.
It was a surgeon. Yeah, it was insane.
It was brutal for Oregon, man. I get it was day one for Bo Nix and day one for Dan Lanning there.
But you got to be able to win however you can win.
Exactly.
And they couldn't stop them.
It was from the jump last year, you knew. And then, honestly, it was, when it was confirmed, was up in Missouri.
Well, that's true.
That was when I was for sure. I was like, this team.
We're going to get to his best wins and so forth in a second. In 23, if you're looking for the moment, to me, so far, it's been the discussion at the half. Not necessarily from Kirby, from everybody in there. When I saw that on Wednesday or whenever it was, I was like, these guys, they don't have near the problem everybody thinks they have. Well, I knew that after I watched the game on Sunday, but to back it up like that. You've been around this entire process. You haven't covered the team the entire process, but what was their breakthrough moment as a program, and then what was the best moment as a program?
The breakthrough moment?
Breakthrough moment. When did you know this was going to work?
the Rose Bowl. I mean,
Oh,
if
it
we're
took
talking
that
about
long.
as a program
Okay, go ahead.
back then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Back then, I mean, when you go in and you Georgia won. It just felt like an iconic day and moment.
Oh, it
And
was.
Georgia won that.
Yeah,
and,
it was.
It just felt like things had changed. Even though that they lost, a week later, things were different. And I mean, earlier in that year, you could tell that it had been moving in the right direction. But then, you flash forward a few years, it wasn't as pretty in 18 and 19 and 20 as it was in 17. But
Yeah, that's true.
They were still moving in the right direction. They were still figuring out. I mean, it feels like time changed when Keely Ringo was running down that field. It felt like something changed.
That was
in
the
college
biggest
football.
moment.
That was the biggest moment. Because it was a mental thing too. It was Georgia changed as a program that day, and part of that was because it was against Alabama.
I think if they had not played Alabama, it wouldn't have the same. I mean,
It wouldn't have the same emphasis. It wouldn't feel as deep.
no, there's a reason why Alabama Georgia is on the cover of Dogstruction. And I saw Lauren's book. We're down here in middle Georgia, or heart of Georgia, where Lauren Smith. I shouldn't just use people's first name. Lauren didn't grow up that far from here in Wrightsville, just like Herschel. And he's got that moment with Keely on the cover. That is the iconic moment. I went to go to the Red Zone and see Scott Mindy after that. And I said, "What do you think I should do?" He said, "You've got to put that on the cover. That is the only thing people are." And that's right. It had to be that moment. And I said, "Well, I have a great picture of that." But that's another story for another time. As it turns out, college football, I've told you for a long time, we never know when something ends.
No.
We don't know when something ends. Georgia could be at the end right now, and we don't know it.
I think what you've always told me is you don't know where you're at in time.
Correct.
I think that's the way you've always said it.
We don't know
Yeah.
when things are going to end. We can go back to where it started. To me, I think Notre Dame is the easy answer, and that's probably true up there at South Bend. But I think what they did to Mississippi State a couple of weeks later was, wow, man, these guys are going to lose for a while. These guys are not going to lose for a while. They are throttling people physically. They are doing whatever they want to do. And it's never been about any one player from that point forward. Although Nick Chubb and Sony were very important in that time. I think, but college football probably did change when Keely ran down the sideline. You don't have to give all the details necessarily, but what do you remember from that moment? And that was one of the most consequential moments in this 100 games.
It was like a physical feeling through the stadium. And I think there were definitely more Georgia fans that day than
There were.
Alabama. I would
There
say
were.
it was probably a 60-40 split.
Probably
if I
70-30,
remember.
yeah.
Maybe 70-30. You could just hear the relief.
Yeah.
I mean, relief. It was very different than LA against TCU.
Oh,
It
totally.
was more triumphant. And but I you talk about when did you know for sure this was moving forward? I mean, you knew from the jump with Kirby that it was the real deal. Getting all of those players to stay in 16.
That was probably
when they could have left.
that was actually probably the moment.
Keeping Jacob Eason in the Jacob didn't turn out to be what we all thought he was going to maybe be, but keeping him coming to Athens, I think that was a really big thing.
It was.
So yeah, it started from the jump with Kirby, but these things take time, and
It's hard to know that there's any one moment to boil it down to. I think Notre Dame, Mississippi State, but those might not happen without Nick and Sony and Davin and everybody coming back. Lorenzo, those four specifically.
yeah.
That was as important a moment as Kirby Smart has had in his time at Athens, because until that moment, he really didn't have a national championship caliber team in 17. And 17 jump-started everything. It was they were going to win national championships.
Mm-hmm.
They just won it with a walk-on from Blackshear, okay?
Yeah.
So they were going to win national championships, but that fast-forwarded it, if you want to call it that. That was going to happen.
It was year two, man.
Yeah.
It was year two. They were ahead of schedule.
For sure.
They were ahead of schedule, and so you knew that in 17 that it was going to happen.
What will happen in their next 100 games with Kirby as their head coach?
Kirby is their head coach.
It's probably about 8 years, maybe 7.
I mean, I think it'll be similar.
Okay.
I think it'll be similar. Just because, I don't, unless they just keep winning and then Kirby himself gets complacent after a while, which I have a hard time seeing just because of the way he's wired. It should be a similar 7 years. It's hard to win more than what they've done in a 7-year period. It's almost unheard of.
They could win one. I mean, I think in the next 7
I don't think they're done winning national championships.
I don't think it's out of the question at all that they win in the next 7 years 3 more national championships. But I don't know if that's. We don't know what SC is going to be like. We don't know what Texas is going to be like.
No, and the entire landscape's different.
It's going to change.
It's going to change. The league is different.
The league is different.
When you factor in Texas and Oklahoma, the playoff is going to be different.
Right.
It'll be so. There are a lot of differences, and they'll have to adapt.
They will have to.
Kirby Smart has done a really good job of adapting while also doing it the way he traditionally wants to do it. Right? I mean, when you look at the transfer portal, they barely pick people out from the transfer portal because he wants to establish a culture that begins when they're 18.
People say that that is a real thing. This is not some Pollyannish, Dabo Swinney thing. This is like a real thing for them. Well, I'm sure Dabo and them feel that way, but the results do not speak for themselves up there. At Georgia, they have. I think the next 100 games will not be dissimilar from these. I think that this is Florida's worst nightmare. The reverse Steve Spurrier. I think Kirby's actually better program runner than Spurrier was. I don't know if he's better than Nick, but it's not far from that, if not better. And I think that he's the best coach in college football today. I don't know what tomorrow brings.
No, he is the best right now.
Right now,
plain and simple. It might not be super close. Right, that's no knock on Saban.
Right now.
But right now, where we're at in time, it's Kirby Gap.
Yeah, I think so too. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the website.